So you've been diagnosed with MS, and that's overwhelming, which is to be understood. My name's Aaron Boster. I'm an MS neurologist in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm going to spend a few minutes with you trying to help you decode this wackadoodle disease and help you figure out a way to live your best life despite having MS. Let's jump in. So just level set education, like what the hell is multiple sclerosis? To understand MS, we need to think about the immune system, which is the part of your body that fights off foreign invaders. So when you come in contact with a virus or a bacteria or a parasite or what have you, your immune system identifies that bad guy as a bad guy and then it beats it up. At the same time, your immune system needs to not attack yourself. So as the immune system is doing its surveillance in the body and it sees one of your own cells, it needs to be like, oh, hey, me, nice to see me. Nice to see me too. And then move on and not attack you. Autoimmunity is a situation where the immune system makes an error in judgment, and it unfortunately identifies part of your body as a foreign invader. And you're probably familiar with a lot of autoimmune diseases, you just might not know they're autoimmune. For example, type 1 diabetes or juvenile diabetes is a situation where the immune system inappropriately attacks the pancreas. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks the joints of the body. Those are autoimmune conditions. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune condition where the immune system inappropriately attacks the holiest of holies, the supercomputer that runs the body, the brain, and the superhighway, the spinal cord, that takes all the information from the brain down to your feet and then back up. Now, when there's acute bouts of inflammation, when the immune system crosses from the bloodstream into that central compartment and identifies part of you as foreign and beats up on it, whichever part of the nervous system is under attack may short circuit. So God forbid that occurs in your eye and you can't see very well. That's called an optic neuritis. My point here is where that attack occurs determines what you experience. And we call that an attack, a flare, an exacerbation, a relapse. It's all the same thing. And most people with multiple sclerosis have a relapsing form of MS, where periodically they can have these relapses or attacks. Also, separate from relapses, people can have a slow, steady decline in neurological function. And when I say slow, I'm talking over years and years, not days or months. And these are the two ways that people impacted by MS can become neurologically impaired. So what causes MS? Well, it's nothing you did. You didn't eat the wrong food or forget to exercise or something like that. We believe that there's a genetic predisposition among some people to be more inclined to develop autoimmune conditions compared to others. And that's not something you can control, obviously. Then someone with those genes can have environmental risk factors which increase or decrease a given person's risk to go on to develop MS. The ones that we're familiar with are things like low vitamin D levels pre-puberty. And we get most of our vitamin D through the sun. And so we oftentimes find that people that live farther away from the equator have less sun exposure and have less vitamin D. And at least as a population, you see more MS in those areas of the world. Also, exposure to smoke, like smoking or secondhand smoke, particularly pre-puberty, can increase a given individual's risk. It turns out that morbid obesity can increase an individual's risk. One of the things that we've learned recently is contracting mononucleosis, or EBV, the kissing flu, is very, very common. In fact, 95% of all Americans are exposed to EBV, but it looks like darn near 100% of all people with MS have been exposed to EBV, or mono. And what we think happens with this genetic predisposition and then these environmental risk factors which can increase a given person's risk, the human comes in contact with EBV mononucleosis, and the immune system identifies it as a foreign invader and builds an arsenal to beat up EBV. So I'm talking about making antibodies and special cells that fight EBV. And you maintain that immunity for the rest of your life. But unfortunately, that same arsenal by accident identifies your brain and spinal cord as EBV, as mono. So from that point forward, when your immune system is surveying and it comes in contact with those parts of your body, brain, spinal cord, it attacks it. And once that's set up, we don't know how to undo it. And that's our current understanding of what causes multiple sclerosis. Now, I want to be really clear with you. Untreated MS is horrible. So untreated MS is a monster, and MS is the leading cause of non-traumatic neurological disability amongst young people. Now, the good news is we don't do untreated MS. And in the modern era, we can make MS boring. So really, that's what I'm about to share with you. How do we make this disease boring? So let's talk about that now. So let's start by laying out some goals. The first thing that I want you to do is literally on a piece of paper with a pen, I want you to write down some life goals. The reason that's so important to me is I can help you learn how to beat up on MS. I can teach you how to make MS boring, but I can't teach you why. So I want you to know why. Why are we fighting? So are you planning on climbing Machu Picchu? Are you planning on having 5 more children? Do you have a side hustle that you want to develop? Why are we fighting? Write that on a piece of paper. And I want you to think about long-term goals. I want to walk my son down the aisle. I want to finish my PhD. That's something that I want you to keep and I want you to look at periodically because I think it's really important. Now, as far as MS goals or the target of MS care, I like the concept of NEDA, no evidence of disease activity. So in other words, the target that we're shooting for is no further attacks. The target is no new spots on future MRIs. The target is not to accrue neurological disability. And the target is to have normal rates of brain volume loss or atrophy as we age. So that's 4 things, so we call that NEDA 4. Now, the likelihood that we can accomplish that your entire life is darn near 0. But before you switch to another video and say, Dr. Boster's crazy, I want to explain to you that this is a goal or a target. It's like saying that we're going to win national championships. So I always think about basketball and March Madness where 64 teams all go into a big tournament. And I imagine that at the beginning of the season, 64 coaches tell each one of their teams, boys, we're going to win. Now, 64 coaches can't all be right because only one team wins the tournament. And it's not that 63 coaches are lying. What they're really saying is we will conduct ourselves as champions. So in this example, they're going to play like champions, sleep like champions, eat like champions, study like champions, and they're going to go out and do the best job they can. Now, if they go out and they play the first game of the season and they lose, they don't fire the coach and disband the team and everyone's sad. What they do is they do a root cause analysis and they make some changes and then they go back out and play. And that's the way that I want us to think about NEDA. The reason I like it so much is number one, it's not highfalutin. If you're trying to live your best life, taking medicines and doing all the things we're talking about, and you have an attack, that's not okay. Similarly, if we're doing all the things and you have a new spot on your MRI, not okay. If you're accruing neurological disability, not okay. And if your brain volume rates are shrinking too quickly, not okay. So I like the fact that NEDA is something that is easily understood and easily tracked. Now, with that in mind, I want to operationalize how the hey we do this. So let's turn to that next. Real quick before we go on, if you found some value in this video, do me a solid and give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Thank you. I'd like to divide the management of MS into 3 categories: treating attacks when they occur, treating symptoms that suck, and then slowing down the disease. That's the big daddy, and we'll talk about that last. So let's start by talking about an attack. So we don't go looking for the flat tire we don't have. You've never been driving down the road and said to the person sitting next to you, hey, do you think the front left tire blew up? That's not a question because God forbid if the front left tire blows up, you know about it. Similarly, attacks aren't subtle. And I would like to teach you what I call the 24-hour rule. So if you have a neurological symptom that lasts less than a day, it's not very likely to be an MS attack. So for example, if you wake up and your hand's numb and you shake it out, that's probably not an MS attack. And I oftentimes tell my patients, then you don't have to call me. However, if you have a new neurological symptom that you haven't had before, or an old one that's been away for a long time and now it comes back, and it lasts longer than 24 hours, then I think it's worthwhile to give your neurologist a phone call. Because MS attacks are caused by inflammation in the brain and spinal cord. And inflammation doesn't go away in a day. Think about it. Let's pretend that you socked me in my cheek, and my cheek got all puffy. Tomorrow, it's more puffy because inflammation lasts for a while. And with an MS attack, we expect that the symptom's going to last for more than 24 hours. Now, as a human being, you don't exactly know it's an attack. You just know that your leg's numb, God forbid, or that you're having trouble seeing out of your eye. And I want you to bring that to the attention of your neurologist. What we're going to do on our end, the first thing that we're going to do is listen carefully, and we're probably going to try to rule out an infection. Because if you have a little infection, whether that be a sinus infection or even like a urinary tract infection that you don't know about, that can raise your core body temperature and it can cause old neurological symptoms to come back out. That's called a pseudo attack. That's a very real event. It's just not caused by new inflammation. It's actually the damaged nervous system from before short-circuiting. And so if we identify an infection, we're going to treat that with antibiotics. We're going to make you better and get you back in play. If we work you up and there's no infection, then we may offer steroids at a very high dose to quell inflammation and make you get better faster. And so this is an interplay where you need to be communicating with your neurologist and your neurologist needs to be communicating with you. Now, if we do things well, you shouldn't be having attacks, or at least not having them very often. But when you have them, we don't want to just let them go on and on. We want to put the kibosh on them. Also, once you have an attack and you're treated, I think it's a best practice to go back to the neurologist about a month later to make sure that you've fully recovered. And last comment, if you're taking an MS medicine, one of the goals of MS medicines, disease-modifying therapies, is to prevent attacks. So if you're on one of these disease-modifying therapies and you have an attack, that's not okay. That's like saying if you're on birth control and you get pregnant, well, it didn't work. And so another thing that we need to do if you have a breakthrough attack is you need to think about, do we need to upgrade the MS therapy? Now, there's a lot more that we could talk about, but in the scope of things, I just want you to be thinking, if I have a symptom lasting longer than 24 hours, I'm going to holler at my neurologist. The second thing I want us to be thinking about are symptoms. Now, symptoms are things that suck. And oftentimes, people impacted by MS can accrue some degree of neurological disability, which can massively impact their quality of life in a bad way. Now, this can be things like pathologic fatigue, where they're absolutely exhausted, cog fog, where as the day goes on, they have increasing trouble thinking. It can be very serious depression. It can be difficulties with bladder function, with urgency and accidents, or difficulty emptying, or similar problems with bowels. It can be sexual dysfunction. It can be neuropathic pain. You can accrue neurological disability and it can destroy the quality of your life, which is not okay. And so in addition to treating attacks when they occur, the second thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we're helping you live your best life by treating symptoms that suck. What's your responsibility? It's very straightforward. Bring these symptoms to your MS neurologist and say, hey, I've got this thing going on and I really don't like it. And there should be a conversation about what the options are to treat that. And by the way, if your neurologist is not comfortable with that particular symptom, that's okay, but they then need to refer you to a subspecialist that can help you game that out. I need you to be a good self-advocate. I need you to say, listen, this bothers me and I'm not okay with it, and I need some medical help to help me live my very best life. And I think it's really, really important. If we slow down MS, which is the third thing that we'll talk about next, and you're miserable because of chronic symptoms, we're not doing our best job. And I think that we should be doing our best job. Part of that is treating symptoms. The third aspect to managing MS is the most important, and that's slowing the disease down. And I have a saying that I want you to be 5 for 5 in your fight against MS. I want you to be 5 for 5 because there's 5 things that I know about that I think slow the disease down. And so obviously I want you to be doing them all the time. When you're diagnosed with MS, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And throughout your MS journey, there'll be times when you'll say, am I doing all the stuff I'm supposed to be doing? Well, my answer is, are you doing all 5? There aren't 6. And so let's go through all 5 right now. Number 1 is to not smoke stuff. So smoking tobacco or cannabis speeds up MS considerably. And not smoking slows the disease down. Why? Because lighting a carbon-based thing on fire and then sucking in the smoke is super pro-inflammatory. And so not smoking is one of the biggest things, biggest modifiable risk factors that you can do to slow your disease down. Now, to take that a step further, I also think it's really important that we control other cardiovascular risk factors. Things like managing high cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, etc. Because managing the cardiovascular risk factors is all about brain health and keeping your brain healthy so that it doesn't age at an accelerated rate is a key component to living your best life with MS. That's number one. Number two is to exercise as part of your lifestyle. And I crafted that sentence very carefully. When you do something as part of your lifestyle, you're not rewarded when you do it, and you're not punished when you don't do it. It's just part of what you do. So I have a lifestyle of showering every morning. I don't tweet out, I had an awesome shower. It's just something that I do. And if for some reason I wasn't able to shower first thing in the morning, no big deal, I'll just do it later. I need you to cultivate a lifestyle where exercise is like that. Now, I don't expect you to go out and become a professional MMA fighter or a professional mountain climber or anything like that. We have to figure out a way to integrate exercise realistically into your lifestyle, which is not an easy thing to ask you to do. Sometimes we need to get a neurophysical therapist to help us develop a home wellness program. Sometimes we need to explore things like water-based therapy, like water Zumba or swimming or walking in the pool. But the four things that I want us to keep in mind related to exercise are very simple. We want to work on balance. Balance is really important in MS. We want to work on core strengthening, limb flexibility, and cardiovascular endurance. So whatever exercise you don't hate is the one I want you doing, and I want you thinking, which of these am I working on today? Number three is to eat smart. And there's a lot to be said about nutrition in MS. It's a fool that thinks that what you eat doesn't impact your disease, because it certainly does. When we think about nutrition, it can get overwhelming. And so for this video, I'm just going to bring up three things that I really think you should be doing as it relates to diet. Number one, you need to up your water game. Most people are super dehydrated. And in the setting of MS, I assure you that makes symptoms much worse. So if you're a lady, I need you drinking 100 ounces of water a day. And if you're a gentleman, 120. Now, that sounds like a lot of water because it is, but there's easy ways to adopt that. For example, if you can drink a large glass of water with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then a glass of water between breakfast and lunch, and between lunch and dinner, there's your 100 ounces right there. I don't expect you to go from not drinking to drinking 120 ounces overnight. It's something that you have to work towards. And be wary of caffeinated and alcoholic beverages, because those actually dehydrate you. So for every cup of coffee, you probably need to add in a glass of water. The second thing as it relates to nutrition is supplementing vitamin D. Now, don't do this without the supervision of your neurologist, but I want you to have a vitamin D level that's up there. So I check a blood test at the Boster Center. That blood test is called the vitamin D 25-OH level. And I want that level to be above 50 but below 100. Because the data looks like higher levels of vitamin D slow the disease down. Now, there's a couple different ways of getting vitamin D. If you go out near shirtless in full sun for 15 minutes, you'll absorb about 5,000 international units of D3, which is what I want you to have typically. But about half the year in Ohio, you would freeze to death, and your neighbors might call the police, and so that might not be applicable. You can get vitamin D naturally by eating certain foods like egg yolks and fatty fish, but to be honest, the amount that you need is really, really high. And so most often we recommend that people take a vitamin D3 pill. Now I say D3 because that's the most bioactive form of vitamin D. That's actually what we make in our skin through sun reactions, and that's the kind that I want you to supplement with. The third thing that I'll talk about in this video as it relates to nutrition is avoiding processed foods, sugar-laden foods, fast foods, fried foods, diet foods, foods with high fructose corn syrup. I want you to avoid foods that have ingredients with words that you can't pronounce, because that's not a food, that's a chemical. And so that's what I have as it relates for starting off with nutrition. Number 4 in being 5 for 5 is the daily practice of mindfulness, which I define as being in the present moment without prejudice. So doing an activity in the now and not telling yourself a movie in your mind about what might happen in the future or lamenting about something you missed in the past. My joke is, if you're having sex and thinking about work, you're not doing it right. Western culture is stressful, and stress and stressors make MS worse. And mindfulness is an awesome sauce way of helping manage stress. And so I want at least 5 minutes of mindfulness integrated into your day. Remember how earlier in the video I shared that I have a lifestyle of showering? Well, I added something during the pandemic to the end of my shower. Once I'm done cleaning myself, I sit down on the shower floor cross-legged, close my eyes, and I practice breathing. Now, immediately, all these thoughts come and, Boster, get up, go to work, what are you doing? And I just let them come. And then I find myself calm down and I listen to the water and I just focus on my breathing. 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes. Now, truth be told, it took a while to get used to it, but I'm now really good at it. And it's amazingly energizing. I love it. I actually carve out extra time in the morning so that I can practice mindfulness this way. Now, you don't have to do shower meditation, but I do think that in order to live your best life despite MS, you need to be spending at least 5 minutes a day being mindful. Now, number 5, and being 5 for 5, is to take the most effective disease-modifying therapy that you're comfortable taking and make sure that it's working. And again, I crafted that sentence very carefully. When I think about disease-modifying therapies, I think about them in order of efficacy. The most efficacious, second most, third most, because not all the medicines are similar. Not all the medicines are as good as each other at decreasing relapses and decreasing disability and stopping new spots and controlling brain volume. And so I want you on the most effective medicine that you're comfortable taking. This is a conversation between you and your neurologist. And we need to find one that's a good fit for you. And then we need to monitor to make sure that things are going okay. I have a lot of videos on my channel where I break down each of these 5 for 5 concepts. But I wanted to sort of lay them out there for you today, again, with the goal of helping educate you and helping make this a little less overwhelming. If you'd like to up your game and learn more about how to beat up on MS, watch the video that's on your screen right now. And until my next Monday morning video or my next monthly live stream, or even better yet, the next time I see you at the Boster Center for MS, this is Aaron Boster saying be safe and take care.